The clock ticked loudly in the quiet office, the soft rhythmic sound breaking the tense silence in the small veterinary clinic. The staff had never experienced a situation quite like this before. The grizzly bear, a once mighty and feared creature, was sitting in the corner, its eyes filled with uncertainty. They were supposed to put him down today. The decision had already been made, the bear's fate sealed by its previous behavior. Yet, as the vet prepared the lethal injection, something happened that no one could have predicted. The clinic's doors opened, and a woman walked in carrying a baby, wrapped in a soft blanket. Her arrival was almost unnoticed at first, but when she approached the cage where the grizzly bear was sitting, everyone stopped and watched in confusion. What was this woman doing here? And why was she holding a baby in her arms? The grizzly bear, tired and weak from its long stay in captivity, had been deemed a threat to society. It had been causing trouble in the forest for weeks, with reports of aggressive behavior and escalating danger to human life. The decision was clear: euthanize the bear before it could cause any more harm. But no one knew what this woman and her baby would do. As she slowly approached the bear, she smiled softly, and the bear's eyes locked onto hers. There was no fear in the woman's gaze, only calm determination. "Can you help him?" she whispered softly, her voice gentle, yet filled with urgency. She looked at the bear, her eyes full of empathy, as if she understood the pain he had gone through. She didn't see a vicious animal. She saw a soul in need of healing. The staff looked at each other in disbelief. What could this woman possibly think she could do? The grizzly bear had been marked for death, and there was no turning back. But the woman didn't seem fazed by the staff's doubts. She stepped forward, her hands gripping the baby's blanket tighter as she took another step closer to the cage. Without warning, the bear, once known for its brutal behavior, began to move closer to the woman. His massive paws gently shifted as he stood to his full height. The room held its collective breath as the bear took slow, deliberate steps toward her. The woman did not flinch, did not retreat. In fact, she reached out and placed the baby softly in the bear's large, yet surprisingly gentle paws. The transformation was almost immediate. As the grizzly bear touched the baby, it seemed to calm, its earlier aggression melting away. The atmosphere in the clinic shifted, the tension lifting as the bear's demeanor softened. It was almost as if the baby had given the bear a sense of peace. The grizzly bear, who had once been deemed too dangerous for rehabilitation, now looked like a mother herself, gently cradling the baby in its paws. The staff, stunned and speechless, could hardly believe their eyes. The woman had done the unthinkable. She had brought a lost baby to the bear, and somehow this simple act had made the grizzly bear change. But how? What did this baby do that made the bear so docile, so protective, and so calm? The woman, still holding the baby, glanced back at the staff. She spoke, her voice soft yet commanding. "This bear isn't what you think it is. He's been misunderstood. He needs someone to show him kindness, just like this child. He's not a monster. He's simply afraid." Clarity began to dawn on the veterinarians. The baby, as small and fragile as it was, had a powerful effect on the bear. Could it be that the bear recognized something in the child, something familiar, something that triggered its protective instincts? Clara, one of the senior veterinarians, couldn't believe her own thoughts. How had this woman known? How had she known that a baby could break the barrier between a wild animal and its instinct to protect? The nurse, who had been holding back tears since the bear had entered the room, finally allowed her emotions to take over. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched the incredible scene unfold. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a moment of connection, a moment where two beings, one human, one wild, had crossed paths and found peace. Is he calm?" the woman asked, her voice trembling slightly. Clara nodded, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes. He's calm. He's never been like this before." The staff watched, captivated, as the woman slowly walked away from the bear, leaving the baby nestled safely in the bear's arms. The grizzly bear watched her leave, its once fierce and threatening eyes now filled with something more. Understanding. The moment had arrived, and everything had changed in an instant. This was not the story they had prepared for. This was not a typical day at the clinic. But in that moment, everyone understood something profound. Sometimes, it takes a single act of kindness to transform a life. And so, as the nurse wiped her eyes, she understood. The bear would not die today. As the days went by, the small veterinary clinic had become the epicenter of attention. News of the grizzly bear's miraculous transformation spread quickly. People from neighboring towns, animal rights activists, and wildlife experts flooded the hospital, eager to witness the bear and the human baby's unexplainable bond. Some were skeptical, but most were awestruck by the extraordinary events that had unfolded in the past few days. The story was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, a tale of a wild animal, a misunderstood creature, and a helpless baby coming together in the most unlikely of circumstances. The baby, now named Aiden, had begun to thrive under the care of the medical staff. He was healthy, his skin soft and warm again, and his small chest rose and fell with steady breath. But more than that, there was a glow to his presence, something that couldn't be explained. Aiden had come into this world facing abandonment, and yet, here he was, saved by the compassion of a wild bear. The grizzly bear, now known as Tala, had become an unlikely hero. She had spent every moment with Aiden, staying close, watching over him protectively, as if she knew that her duty wasn't over. The nurses had placed a cot beside Tala's cage, where she would curl up at night, keeping Aiden close to her. Though she was a wild animal, there was something profoundly maternal about her. Every time the baby cried, Tala would rise to her feet, gazing at Aiden, as if checking on him. And every time the baby calmed, Tala would lay down once more, her large body curling protectively around him. It was as if the roles had reversed. What was once a dangerous, powerful animal had become a guardian. She was the protector, and Aiden, though so small, was now the one she was sworn to keep safe. But as the days passed, an uneasy tension began to build. Tala had become more restless. It was clear that her natural instincts were pulling her towards the wild once again. The doctors and nurses could see the longing in her eyes. They knew that as much as she had grown attached to Aiden, the forest called to her. She was a creature of the wild, and this was never meant to be her permanent home. Dr. Sanders, who had taken a keen interest in Tala's story, understood the delicate balance that now existed. He had seen many wild animals, but never one so intertwined with a human life. Tala had saved Aiden from certain death, but now, it seemed, the time had come for her to make a choice. One chilly morning, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon, Dr. Sanders stood in the clinic, looking out at the snow-covered trees beyond the hospital windows. He could see Tala in the distance, pacing within her enclosure, her large, powerful body restless, her eyes always drifting toward the door. It was a heartbreaking decision, one that no one in the room was ready to make, but it was one that had to be faced. The time had come for Tala to leave, to return to the wild where she belonged. Dr. Sanders approached the cage, slowly, cautiously, as though he too feared this moment. Tala paused, noticing his presence. The moment was heavy with emotion as the doctor knelt before the grizzly bear. He knew what was coming. His voice was soft, but steady, as he spoke to her. "Tala," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've done something that no one could have imagined. You've saved a life. You've shown us the true meaning of compassion. But now, it's time to go back home." The words seemed to resonate with Tala, whose eyes met his with a deep, knowing gaze. It was clear she understood. Meanwhile, Aiden, now fully awake and rested, had begun to coo in his cot. The baby, as if sensing the shift in energy, stretched out his tiny hand toward Tala. She moved closer to him, her large paws gently reaching out to touch him. There was no aggression, only love. Tala gently nudged Aiden's tiny hand with her nose, as if saying her final goodbye. The bond that had formed between them was undeniable, an unspoken connection that no one could ever explain. Tala stood back up, her body towering over the room, her gaze drifting toward the door. She knew it was time. With one last look at Aiden, the bear turned toward the door, as if saying goodbye to the child she had cared for. And then, with a strength that had once been feared, she stepped into the unknown, back into the wilderness where she belonged. The door closed gently behind her, leaving the clinic and the people inside in stunned silence. But there was no sorrow in their hearts. Instead, there was something far more powerful: gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the lives saved, and for the bond between a wild animal and a helpless child that had defied all expectations. Aiden, now in the hands of the medical staff, would grow up with a story no one else would ever have. A story of a bear who had shown the world that sometimes, even in the wildest of creatures, there exists a tenderness that,